Firstly, I just want to say I think on this we have a fundamental choice as to what direction we want to go on housing affordability. So on the one hand, we can continue with the kind of current model of private provision, turning homes into financial assets, pushing up prices, and what the government is proposing is to introduce more and more subsidies to that model and more discounts to it. But it's essentially continue with the same model that has been failed over the last number of decades. Or the alternative model is to actually try and tackle land costs, land speculation and building costs and bring affordability in across the housing system, which will benefit everyone. And then we won't actually, if that's the approach we take, then we won't have to get into a debate about cut-off points and income limits, because the proposals will actually be taking some of the speculation costs out of housing and make them more affordable for everyone. So that's the kind of approach that I would favour. I have to say, if the government is serious about housing, I think one thing you could do now to indicate your seriousness in housing, and you could do it tonight, is you could say that the government will accept in full Article 31 of the European Social Charter on housing. Now, Article 31 of the Social Charter on housing is not a radical demand or anything like it. It commits the state to promoting access to housing of an adequate standard. It says that we'll prevent and reduce homelessness with a view to its elimination, and says it will make the price of housing accessible to those without adequate resources. They are not radical ambitions in Article 31. I think it's incredible that the government and the state signed up to the European Social Charter 20 years ago, but to this day won't commit in full to Article 31. So I'd say to you, Minister, that you should commit the Irish state, show a bit of ambition on this, commit the Irish state to Article 31, and that would be a good signal of intent. So I'd ask you to do that. In terms of affordability and the changes that have been happening in recent years, and we've seen levels of home ownership falling, especially for younger people. We've seen over time the growth in house prices outstripping growth in incomes substantially, and we've seen intergenerational divides in terms of access to housing, deepening inequality, social exclusion, housing insecurity and homelessness as a result. And this is part of an overall trend of commodifying and financialising housing, turning homes into financial instruments and into assets for investment. A lot of this happened originally with the deregulation of the mortgage market in the 80s, which led to a flood of cheap credit into housing. It also happened when we joined the euro, which exacerbated that problem, and there was a lack of regulation and control over the banks at the time, and that inflated prices. Land hoarding and speculation has also contributed to house price inflation and inaffordability. And more recently, the last government accelerated a lot of these policies in terms of favourable tax treatment for REIT investment funds, in terms of encouraging things like short-term lets, in terms of reducing standards, and in terms of even going as far as privatising the provision of homeless services and homeless hostels. So there's huge negative consequences from this, and we need a change in direction on this. I think if you look internationally, there are good examples that we can look at where, in terms of housing affordability, if you take the case of South Korea, housing is actually becoming more affordable over time in South Korea, the absolute opposite to Ireland. And that's where the state plays a very large role in the provision and development of housing. So housing as affordability in terms of people's incomes is becoming less of a burden over time, which shows that when the state gets involved and is serious about this, it can be very effective. If you look at countries like Germany, municipalities, local authorities there can actually freeze the existing land use values and acquire land at existing land value. Of course, there's nothing new in that idea. It was proposed here in Ireland, as everyone in the House would know, some 47 years ago in the Kenny report. I note the current Taoiseach 2 years ago said that he was looking at whether or not the Kenny report could be implemented in Ireland. There's been silence on that since. I think that's what we should be looking at. There's one of the things that creates housing inaffordability and drives up the price of housing and drives up the price of land is the investment that we make, public investment into infrastructure, and also, of course, our zoning process. And there's no reason that we should be gifting that uplift in land values to private developers. In effect, what we're doing is we're using public resources to make landowners rich, while at the same time making housing unaffordable for people. So that's something that we need to tackle. And if we're serious about affordability, that's something that we should be doing. One of the arguments that's often raised against that is constitutionality. And we know from the 2004 Oireachtas all-party group that looked at the Constitution, their recommendation was the Kenny report and included representatives from the government parties. Their conclusion was the Kenny report would be constitutional to implement. They noted that the Supreme Court had already found that Part 5 provisions were constitutional, and indeed the Kenny report itself argued strongly that the legislation should be passed and referred to the Supreme Court so that it could be tested beyond doubt. And that, of course, would have an impact in terms of housing affordability. So I think it's that sort of systemic change that we need rather than just initiatives that will look to subsidise and provide discounts. And some of those discounts, unfortunately, are modest. The LIHAF funding hasn't been entirely successful. Some of the discounts are very small, and also the uptake of the LIHAF funding. I know in my constituency, funding that was awarded years ago still hasn't been taken up, and the infrastructure still hasn't been built. So, you know, looking at, I think we need more systemic reform than simply looking at some of the current schemes, looking at expanding them. We do have a fundamental choice in this as to what direction we go. Are we looking at providing more homes, or are we looking at providing more commodities? Are we looking at providing places for families to be secure and to flourish in? Or are we looking to provide more investment opportunities? And government policy dictates this. Will we be having more built-to-rent schemes, or will we be looking for strong, stable, thriving communities? And will we be looking to subsidise affordable housing and to subsidise land speculation, or will we be implementing policies that will make housing affordable across the board? What do we want to build? What kind of society do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a society or simply a market? So this is a political choice. The policies that the government take in this is going to determine what direction we go in the next number of years. And I would urge the government to go, welcome that the different initiatives are, to go much further than that and actually look at systemic change, look at cutting out speculation. There's no reason why, if that's done successfully in other countries, Germany, the Netherlands, South Korea and so forth, that we should be that we shouldn't be availing of the same policies to make housing affordable, get rid of land speculation and improve the quality of people's lives. Thank you.